Welcome to Vet Watch at DVM 360. I'm your host, Christopher Lee. Today's episode, Smart Isn't Enough, Why Emotional Intelligence Matters in Vet Med. Joining me today is Mike Glauser, who holds an MBA from U of R and Executive Master in Change from INSEAD in France. He has led hundreds of people, managed mergers, advised company presidents and public officials, and navigate leaders and their organizations through change. Mike currently does management consulting with a chain of privately owned veterinary hospitals in Southern California. He loves working out, basketball, snowboarding, mountain biking, and the list goes on, spending time with his wife and 4 kids. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's great to be here, Dr. Lee.
It is good to talk to you again. Now,
Yeah,
let's
no,
go ahead.
no, I'm excited to be here. I've enjoyed our conversations in the past and excited to jump into this. I think it'll be fun.
I know last time, though, it was over some really good Mexican food. So
That's true. Yeah, it's hard to beat that, to be honest with you. Some good tortillas and horchata, you can't beat that.
that was awesome. So let's kind of start with the basics. What does
Yeah.
it really mean to be a leader? And is it about position, personality, or something completely different?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's one that in business, anywhere, private, public, any sector, veterinary, whatever the industry, that's this question that comes up a lot. And I think some of the confusion is people associate being a leader with a title or a position, and that's false. Because you have a big title, yes, you can be a leader, but because you do have it, it doesn't make you a leader. So being a leader is a result of action, not a result of a cool title or an acronym behind your name. And so really for me, leadership is focusing on people, purpose, and productivity. Those are important focuses, and I think all three of them have to be a focus. A leader is someone that inspires, that motivates, encourages. That's what makes you a leader. So anybody can be a leader, I think, is the point. You don't need to wait for a few years to move up the ladder and become have a fancy title and have a lot of people that report to you to be a leader. You can be a leader as an individual contributor, as long as you're focusing on people and the purpose and productivity and whatever you're doing, and really inspiring and motivating and encouraging others. That's what it is. It's action, not position.
So you could be a leader as a chief medical officer or as a brand new kennel attendant joining the veterinary world.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if people understand that, I mean, everybody around them is going to be better. If we can recognize that that's the case, people that come into these management positions or receive a title, in one way or another, and have people that report to them, managing is very different than leading. Managing is, getting things done, yes, but maybe it's just going through the tasks and checking them off. And, at the end of the day, yes, I accomplished this, this, and this, but maybe the people that you're supposed to be leading go home and hate their lives because you yelled them and didn't motivate them, you didn't inspire them or encourage them, or support them. And so that's the difference. The two words aren't synonymous: manager and leader.
And you'd mentioned like the 3 Ps, if I remember, right? People, product, and purpose. And that's kind of what you focus on. Are those also the same like essential attributes that you are as a leader? Like how do people develop into becoming leaders if they want to be?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. And I mean, everybody's journey is a little different. I do think, when the reality is that when we work with people. Even in veterinary medicine, of course, we're attending to our patients, which are, these beloved family members of the clients that come in, but we're dealing with the people. On the back end, when clients aren't there, we're dealing with our people in clinic. And so focusing on the people has to be a huge part of that. I mean, some attributes I think to become a leader, it's because we deal with people, we have to be able to understand them, to listen to them, to recognize the differences, accept them for who they are, all those kinds of things. And so to be a leader, some of the main attributes that, I mean, the list can be long. I mean, we could probably, you could Google what are attributes of a leader, and a whole long list will come up. But three really stick out to me in my experience, working and learning to lead people, learning to even lead my own family, and also what I've observed with clients and just being in the working world. One is the ability to effectively communicate. That's an important attribute of a leader. We communicate all the time. Like we're communicating right now, right? So, with our friends, our partners, if you plan a sports team or you are at work, we're always communicating. And if you can't do it effectively, it's really hard to lead people and motivate them and inspire them. So that's one, is effective communication. Another one is a person's ability to listen. Um, we get in this mode of, wanting to solve problems, and we talk a lot. That's, I think, human nature, because we have these thoughts that it's just our minds are going. And so we want to share all those things, and we talk. But a good leader knows how to listen, because listening is a way that we learn. When we talk, we don't learn. When we listen, we do. And
I always
so
love the phrase, seek first to understand before being understood.
yeah, I love that. And that's exactly what it is. You have to listen to understand, right? On the back end, and then you can flip it and do the other. So that's an important one, in my opinion, is the ability to listen. And then the third one, again, there's a lot, but these three are top of the list for me personally, in my experience, is the ability to adapt, adaptability. Whatever work you're doing, and veterinary medicine especially, every day is different. Every day, every case is different. It's always changing, and so the ability to adapt and flex with what comes at you, that's super important, because otherwise, if we're too rigid and it's black or white and there's nothing in the middle, it's either this or that, we're gonna have a hard time having people follow us and motivating and encouraging and inspiring them to do good work, to be productive, right? One of the P's, productivity. So those are the three, in my opinion, that really stand out and are needed to be a leader: communicating effectively, listening, and the ability to adapt. So,
and all of those sort of sound like things that we describe with emotional intelligence. Is that pretty fair? Like, could you
that's
for everybody?
Yeah, totally fair. And I think so. The higher up you get in an organization, or the more responsibility you have, the more important emotional intelligence becomes, because you're less involved in the technical work. It's people report to you, or people look to you, and so those things become just as important, if not more important. It becomes less important how awesome you are at restraining, or as a technician that's maybe moving up and taking on responsibility, or those are important skills, of course. But now you have the responsibility to lead people, and so those things become important. Like so emotional intelligence it's really the ability to understand, use, and manage our own emotions in an effective way to relieve stress, to communicate effectively, like we talked about, to empathize and understand others, and also to overcome challenges. And that's why adaptability is important, because each day, things are going to get thrown at us, or maybe an angry client, or an angry or frustrated staff member. And so the ability to adapt and overcome challenges is super important. And it's not, so that's on a personal level, you and me, but it's also involves understanding the emotions of others and then responding appropriately. And so it's that awareness. Awareness is a big word that's used when we talk about emotional intelligence, self-awareness, but also awareness of your surroundings, so that you respond in a way that's not going to push people away, or decrease productivity, or push people into an apathetic mode where I don't want to work with this guy or this gal. And so it's also understanding what's going on around you.
So and often when we think about emotions, right, you think about some of the leaders, and certainly like with politics, a lot of times there's a rigidness to it, but emotions are part of it. right? And so how do emotions kind of affect leadership, and should we shy away from emotions?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I actually gave a presentation to a group of professionals just last week. And at the end, a question came up. You know, a lot of people associate this conversation with maybe weakness, or if I pay attention to my emotions, then I'm showing weakness and vulnerability. Um, you know, I would argue that that's not true. Um, we're not saying that, you give into everything and you walk around and your people associate emotions with maybe sensitivity and things like that, but there's much more to it. And so I think in leadership, what we have to understand is that as human beings, emotions are an innate part of who we are. I don't care what your background is, how big or small you are, what color you are, how tall or short, what language you speak. If you're a human being, emotions are a part of who you are. It's an innate part of us. And we work with humans, which means emotions are a part of work, whether we like it or not. And so if we can master our emotions and understand that people have them, our team members, our clients, then we can master our work. I'll take that to the grave. And I don't think understanding or being aware of what triggers you or what triggers those around you to then respond appropriately. I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I think it's a strength and can help you respond in an effective way to then have a result that's positive for the business and the people. So I don't think it's a weakness. A lot of people associate it with that. I think if people tapped a little more into it, they would recognize that they can do a lot more, actually.
So having them is normal and human, and EQ is about how we manage it in ourselves and recognize it in others. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's again, it's if we understand that, any interaction you have, you feel something, right? I mean, you go to ride a roller coaster, you may feel nerves or joy or excitement. If you get in an argument with a friend, that may cause some frustration or some upset feelings. And so, in any interaction, there's always something. And so it's a part of us. And so we have to understand both our own and those of others to be able to manage and respond in a good way. So.
Now, when you're talking about some of those difficult situations, certainly veterinary leaders, like practice managers and owners, they have a lot of tough decisions from staffing, pricing, ethical dilemmas. So how do leaders that have that high EQ, how do they approach high stakes decisions day to day? Is there any special approach that they have and use?
Yeah, I don't. To me, there's a few things that come to my mind as we talk about this, and everybody's personalities and styles are a little different. But I think if you have a foundation of some of these things that I'll mention, I think you'll find that you'll be able to figure things out and have good days and not feel like everything's just in ruin. One of those is, and it has to do with both the clients that come into our hospitals and the team members that we work with. Okay. A foundational principle is that you have to build trust with both parties. You have to build trust with them right out the gate. And I think there's some strategies for doing that. One is that with these tough decisions, we have, things that are challenging for people. They're bringing in what they consider a family member. And so, emotions are going to run high and there's going to be tough decisions to make. Maybe a high cost, treatment plans, things like that may be challenging. So, building trust right out the gate. One thing that we can do to do that is not avoid tough conversations. I've learned that if we look those situations, we look at them head on, and we go through that experience with the client or with the team member, that builds trust and will give you a foundation so that when things happen in the future, because they will, there's going to be challenges that'll come up. you'll have that foundation to stand on, and you will have showed that you can be there for that person. I think another part of how we can build trust with clients and team members is being transparent. Now, you have to use good judgment with that. Sometimes you don't need to say everything that's on your mind or share all the details, but it is important to be transparent about, maybe a treatment plan that's a challenge and it's going to be a high cost, and maybe we need to hospitalize, your pet, and so it's going to be in the hospital for a few days, and this is a treatment plan, and that's challenging for a lot of people. So being transparent about the why is important. I can show an estimate of this is what it's going to be, and if we leave that process up to the client to figure it out on their own, that's not a great strategy. So being there with them during the challenge, being transparent about the why we're doing things, that's going to be pretty powerful. And yeah, I mean, those are some basic things that I think can be foundational, each day.
When I liked how you said that if don't shy away from those difficult conversations. I hate conflict. I try to do what I can to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
But whether it's personal or professional, if I know it's inevitable, I want to get it done right away, because the longer I wait, it seems to just only get worse.
Yeah, that's true. When we avoid it, usually it festers and it can grow. And now we've got a bigger challenge we have to deal with. There's this really cool analogy that I love that reminds me often, because I'm not a huge fan of confrontation either. I don't know that well, I'm sure some people are. One of the things that we can do is, so this analogy of backing up a trailer. I don't know if anybody's that's listening to this has backed up a trailer. I have, and at the beginning it's tough, but you have to do the opposite. And so one of the things that I've learned with this is that when you back up a trailer, if you see the trailer veering off in the wrong direction, you turn your steering wheel toward the problem. Mm-hmm. Normally you would go the other way because you're flipping the front wheels and things like that, but you have to turn towards the problem. And so that's a great reminder for all of us that when we have challenges or problems, face it. And when you face it, you'll usually fix it and get back on track. And so I love that backing up a trailer analogy. But yeah, it's an important thing to face the challenges for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of times with clients that, potentially can be difficult, I'd rather over communicate.
100%. Well, it's way better to over communicate because, you're not giving anybody a chance to misunderstand. And so down the line, you're going to save yourself some headache and time and maybe even money for the client. Absolutely. I love that. That's a great thought.
Now, what can be done to better manage the emotions and expectations in others in those difficult client conversations? Because there's emotions run high very quickly.
Mm-hmm. So true. I mean, you said it was almost like a perfect segue, like you knew what I was thinking, but that communication for me is key. Effective communication. And again, we went back to that, essential attributes of any leader. And one of them is effective communication that I said. And I think that's key because there's 4 things in communication that I think are super important. Number 1 is not giving anybody a reason to misunderstand, which is kind of going to that over communicating. And so that was a great thought by you and a great segue. Because if we're not clear and if we're giving reasons to misunderstand, then things are just going to get chaotic and challenging. And, but you said this, and well, I didn't mean that. So if we over communicate and don't give any reason for misunderstanding, another one is setting clear expectations right out the gate. And another one is giving options. I think giving options is important because if we do this all or none type idea, mm-hmm. then, we're not playing to, maybe what the client can or can't do, but we're also putting the ball in their court when we give options so that we're giving them a little bit of the responsibility. Although, yes, as a doctor, if I'm in a room or, and I'm giving this treatment plan, for example, and emotions are running high, and this goes with both clients and team members, but, we can put the ball in their court and hold them responsible as well and help them be a part of the decision so that, if things don't go the way that we want or anything like that, then both parties take responsibility and there's less problem to deal with. And I think one of the other things that I think is important is we assume a lot, and how we speak, we assume that people understand. But I would say that it's super important to speak the person's quote unquote language, to speak to their understanding. And
Which is hard because you have to read them as much as you need to communicate.
right, exactly, and that's part of kind of that awareness, right? Like this stuff is all connected, um, and you can see that in body language. You can over communicate, etc. Another thing that I would say is that we listen more and we speak less, and we've kind of talked about that. But you'll kind of see a pattern here. We listen more and we speak less because that's where the learning comes from, and then we can manage that conflict a little bit better. So
Now, one of the things that you had said was we need to be not give them have any chance of them not understanding what we're saying.
right.
However, having dealt with some clients, I do feel that they actively twist what is being said to what they want to hear. And I know a lot of hospitals now, they actually have cameras with audio recording in rooms.
Okay.
And those are nice because then you can clearly say, no, let me play back what
Yeah.
you said.
This is what
But
actually happened. Yeah.
this is what actually happened.
Yeah, exactly.
However, in hospitals that I've managed that did not have that, I wanted to get your take on this. I had what was called a code 2. And a code 2 meant that if there was a client where I was concerned that they perhaps were not listening either intentionally or unintentionally, they were hearing something different, then a code 2 meant that at any point that there's client communication, there's two people in that room. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
100% agree. I was literally going to say that. So for me, we call it the rule of two, and this applies. It can never turn into, well, a he said she said type situation, because you can't win that. One thing that's important is that team members, doctors, and other staff are very, very effective in their medical notes and note taking for those that maybe don't have that. But all these interactions and communications should be entered so that we can go back to that and as a fallback, and not just go off of what we remember, because that's a failing strategy. I remember what I want to remember sometimes. I'm pretty sure that happened, and it clearly didn't. I think we've all done that. So I think that's important. But the rule of two is important. I would suggest that in any interaction that you have, um, you know, again, this goes both ways when it's with clients and with staff. If you're having a conversation with a staff member that, is talking about some concerns or, a teaching moment or things like that, sometimes it's in passing and it's informal and quick, may not happen 100% of the time, but as much as you can, code 2, like you said, or the rule of 2, because it's a protection for the team, for you, and even for the client, because it brings the truth out. It minimizes the chance that it doesn't come out, I guess. But yeah, that's a great thing. I love that, and I totally agree.
Yeah, I think if you have the staff to always have the rule of 2, that's always best. But a
Right.
lot of times we just do not have that. So code 2 is always helpful to ensure that you need it when it occurs. And kind of speaking of those difficult clients, right, there's that when you walk in and there's a confrontational client, right, we all get that fight or flight type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as they teach in Fear Free, right, there's that third F, right, freeze.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that happens to a lot of us, right? You go in there and you weren't expecting it, and now they're just coming at you, and it's like your brain is freezing up trying to deal with this.
Yeah.
And, I think most people in the veterinary community, there's a general feeling of sensitivity. We want to help. And so people coming at us is pretty hard. So what strategies do you kind of recommend for people? How do we manage that internal dialogue when aggressive behavior is coming at us?
Yeah. So I think, again, and my experience has taught me, and this is I think probably the third time I've said it this in our conversation, is listen more and talk less. Sometimes a confrontation can de-escalate just by letting the other person get it out of their mouth. Sometimes. And so if we just listen, a lot of times that will kind of auto de-escalate the situation. But it also allows us to think before we talk and be less reactive. When we freeze like that, we start to have thoughts. This idea, so any behavior or like a reaction, so speaking or doing whatever, it starts with our thoughts. So this idea of kind of the head, the heart, and then the hands is what I call it. And so it kind of moves down. We start up here and then it becomes a feeling. Now I feel, annoyed and frustrated, and I start to maybe resent this person. I don't want him as a client or whatever. And then it goes to my hands, or the action part of it, the do or the behavior is what I'm referring to with hands. And then we
Not
behave in
hand
a way.
gestures.
Not hand gestures or smacking someone. No, that's not what it, but if we, if it turned into that, that'd be a problem, obviously. But it starts up here, right? And it's split second stuff. So one thing that, to manage when we feel triggered in that kind of internal dialogue is, we go back and forth and you want to say certain things, or you freeze and you don't know what to say. Maybe that's okay, because it's better to maybe not say something right now anyway. Let them get it out and see what happens. Like you said earlier, seek to understand. So for me, a lot of what I would say, and so this could be a good technique, is in the form of a question instead of just like declarations. This is, you this, you that, or whatever. So when I do talking in the form of a question is powerful, because it sparks thinking on their end, and they don't realize it, but it will shift how they think, because now they have to analyze and come up with an answer. Maybe there's some situations that people are so frustrated and conflicted that doesn't happen. And I don't know, maybe you have to call security or something. But for the most part, when you do speak with questions, because it allows them to shift how they think and then analyze, all while you're trying to seek understanding. Like
it also allows you to maintain some control, correct?
Exactly.
Because answering questions with questions is a common technique of trying to gain control of the situation.
100%. And I think, another thing that you can do in the moment, so something that can counteract the fight or flight mode is an increase of oxygen to your brain. And you can do that through deep belly breathing. And you can do that right there. I mean, you don't have to like sit down in a meditative state but if you can, we're breathing anyway. Just take a few extra seconds to inhale and then come out. And you can do that as we're talking, and as you're listening. And so that will flood your brain with more oxygen and kind of counteract that fight or flight mode, and hopefully bring some clarity and at least some composure. I mean, none of these are perfect solutions because every situation is different, but those are some simple techniques that I would suggest that you can do in that very, very moment. You don't have to say, excuse me, sir, let me go take some deep breaths. I'll be back. You can do it as you're listening. Yeah.
And it can make you seem more thoughtful. John Wayne, now granted, many of the people watching this may not know who he was, but but for the old timers that know who John Wayne was, they did ask him what was his acting secret. And because they said, you always look so deep in thought. He goes, I just count to 3 before I answer.
Yeah.
But that may be a great time to take that deep breath.
That and it allows you to be less reactive, where you can find some composure, etc. So yeah, that's great. I love that.
Now, what do you think about intentional reaction? So I've been to numerous courses of trying to deal with difficult people. And there are some that will say, well, if their energy is up here, then you need to match it. You need to try to, because if they come in and they're like, I'm so upset, blah, blah, blah. And then you simply go back and go, I understand that you're upset. There's a disconnect. They're like, even if you're hearing me, the words that you say sound like you're hearing me, but they may not feel like you're being heard. So what is your thought? Because there's two schools of thought, and some say, you don't want to be reacting to where it's not intentional, but if you're intentionally trying to come up to their volume of voice, that is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I'm of the thought that, a lot of things we do in life, it's not this or this. A lot of things we can do this and this. So I think it's important to show that you can meet them at their level, but not necessarily by matching their yelling or their intensity in that way. And I think you can get there without doing that. So you can do both. Um, you know, I think it goes both ways too. If someone's really conflicted and talking that way, one thought, like you say, I can match that with the same intensity, but it also goes the other way where if you maintain composure, you can be bold, but still maintain composure and meet them at their level. They can also match that. So I think it goes both ways. And that's going to take some experimenting, and it's going to be different with every client. But my opinion is that yelling or getting to that level will never bring the peace that you're looking for, ever. That's my opinion. Um, Now, if they're doing that to you, okay, that also doesn't bring the peace or the solution that you're looking for. But if you do that and match them at that same level, it's not going to help. I think there's ways to de-escalate. One is, I know you were just using an example, but I thought it's maybe good to look at, like, if you sit back and fold your arms, obviously maybe that's not what you're referring to exactly, but it does spark the thought in my mind that the body language that we use can be very intentional and de-escalate.
No, and having that open body language, and I do think that that's part of it, is there is that. I mean, I think we've all had that situation where we've had a bad customer experience, and the person on the other side just goes, "I understand that you're upset," and
Yeah,
you're like, "You don't understand
you
any of
don't.
that."
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of these little things. Another technique I would say is that if we can separate ourselves physically from the environment where that's happening, where those emotions were brought up and are heavy. So something you can do, if we're at the front desk, for example, and this is, a receptionist, and I need to speak to a manager comes out. My suggestion to de-escalate and, one, kind of give a pause to those emotions is to, okay, let's come over here, or let's go into exam room one. And so there's maybe a 15 to 20-second gap, and you separate yourself from the environment where that interaction started. And sometimes that resets, in their mind, kind of what's going on. And then you start with the questions, and you stand up confident, and you look them in the eyes. Yes, I'm at your level, and so then all those things can kind of come into play. But when you separate them from that environment, sometimes there's a psychological separation as well. Like, I'm in a different room now, or I'm in a different part of the hospital. And so things start to de-escalate themselves without people knowing.
Kind of like when you're taken into the manager's room, all of a sudden you're like, "Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
different level."
This I'm well, I feel important.
Yeah.
They're taking this serious. So yeah. Yeah. I think those are some. I mean, it's never easy. I don't want to, you say you have a checklist that you do this every time, it's going to work fabulous. Because that's just not the case. But those are techniques that can for sure um, increase the chances that it's a better outcome. Yeah, or a positive one.
Now, what do you think? I know we're going off on different directions here, but when you're saying like different options and different ways of talking to people, when you think about how to read those clients, especially when they're upset, do you have a default, like, do you like disc training or something in that manner where you're trying to say, for this type of a person that's a come at you type of an anger versus not, I'm going to approach different? Like, do you try to read that?
Yeah, I think so. You have to, because you know a lot of it's gonna be split second stuff, and you're never gonna maybe get it perfect. But you have to, that level of awareness has to be there, and you have to ask yourself those questions internally. Um, you know, what's this person's tendency? And I think if you can get the more context you can get, um, sometimes that comes through asking questions, then the more that's going to allow you to not have to do that in a split second and make snap judgments or assumptions. Sometimes we have to do that, but I think the context is important as much as you can get that, and asking why and understanding. And a lot of times information comes out that's going to give you data that will help you understand. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, well, then let me approach it this way. So there's always more to it than what we see with the naked eye. Always. I think few people are upset all the time just because. Usually they have something going on that's troubling them and that is causing, these reactions. And this probably happens at maybe their home or at the grocery store too. Usually it's not a direct, I hate you. It's personal. You did this, you did that. There's always more than what we see with the naked eye.
Well, and that's a good point. I do think that there are some people that genuinely seem to like to be upset.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that sometimes they're also like, well, because that usually comes with a discount. But I do think listening, I remember early on in my career, before I'd really tried to learn a lot of the soft skills, I remember there's a client and I hated her. Every time she came in, I'm like, she clearly hates me. I don't get why. And I finally just blew up at her. I'm like, I don't get why you're here. You clearly hate me. And she goes, oh, no, I do. I hate you.
Oh, wow. Talk about transparency. Yeah.
She goes, but I think you care about my dog. And I'm in a really bad spot because my daughter just got killed. And because of that, me and my husband split up, and she went through this whole thing. And then all of a sudden, like, we bonded, and I was like, I need to, like you said, there can be some very serious things behind, and maybe they're angry for things that have nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes maybe that is the case, right? Where there was something that went on and it is, I'm with you, but most of the time there's, there are things, there's always more underneath the surface. Life's not easy, and people bring their lives and their emotions into our, to the hospital when they bring their pets. So, some of that crosses over, unfortunately, but there's always more than we can see for sure. But isn't that interesting though? I love that because you were transparent and there was clear communication, and you didn't give her any way to misunderstand what you were saying. It was, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think you like me. And then she came back with the same thing. And so that level of transparency and communication came out, and that brought stuff above the surface that you could then see, oh my goodness, okay. And then it made even her feel better. So that's a great example of being able to communicate effectively, and what it can do for the emotions of both sides, and therefore better the relationship. So
yeah,
it's a great example.
I like to think I've gotten better to where we don't have to get quite to that level of, oh, wow.
Right.
But it did kind of start me on that journey of, wow, in order for us to treat the pet, we have to be able to work through the people as well.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Now sometimes though, there are just difficult clients, and kind of switching on how leaders can, and this comes to managers and hospital owners, how to make staff feel supported. So as an example, I do a little bit of relief work, which it is nice because I don't work there, so I can kind of do whatever I want. But my technician went in, and the client said that she looked ugly because she had no nose rings, and it made it look like she had boogers, and why is she doing that to her face? So I went in and I said, we'll be happy to see you on another day when you have a different approach. And she was really grateful to the fact that I bounced the client. We're not going to help you today. But that's not always an option. That's not always maybe the approach of of that leadership can take. So
Mhm.
how do leaders create that culture where staff feels supportive
Yeah.
with difficult people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, that's why being a leader isn't just your title, because it requires, like we're talking about, how to create a culture of, I feel supported. I feel like I can go to work and I enjoy it. And I feel like if there's a challenge, I'm going to have support and we're going to be able to overcome it. Uh, and so to me, the first thing is that there's some sort of acknowledgement. And that's why, these a leader, the higher up you get, the more responsibility you have, the more important these attributes become, because you have to deal with stuff like this. You're not just dealing with the technical side of the business anymore. And so being able to understand what's going on in the hospital, I think the first one is that you acknowledge, a leader can acknowledge with their staff when those things happen. That makes the staff feel like you care as a leader, that you're on their side, et cetera. And number two, always lifting and encouraging the staff with praise for how they handled it, if it was handled appropriately. I mean, if the staff members start screaming and yelling, hitting the client, you're probably going to get rid of them anyway. So maybe that you can cut that step. But generally, our team members work really hard and do a really good job at maintaining composure, because they understand that this is a profession. And for the most part, I see that they do a really, really good job. So acknowledging that what went on, and then praising them for, the good that happened in that interaction. That's going to lift their spirits and help them understand that when I'm here, I'm supported. And I think the third thing would be to be intentional about helping them separate from that situation if it visibly makes them upset, which again shows support, and that you want to help them, you want them to get back on their feet and feel better and things like that. So meaning, take a break, go away for a little bit, take 10 minutes and whatever, and eat a healthy snack, or whatever, but you guiding that and making that okay, that's going to do a lot in the psyche of the team member, to see that, man, this culture is awesome. Like, yeah, there's challenging days and challenging clients, but gosh, these confrontations are acknowledged by my leader. There's praise for the good that I'm trying to do, because I was trying to do good and he recognized it or she recognized it. That's going to motivate them to continue to behave that way. You're going to encourage that same behavior if you give that praise, and then intention and helping them separate to kind of reset. So I mean, those are just a couple steps that you can do. But that does create a foundation and a culture that's pretty awesome, and a supportive culture.
Now, I'd love your feedback on this, because sometimes I love it, praise what they do good, but sometimes you go and you watch them and you're like, oh, that, that
Not so good. Yeah.
And so how I've always approached it, and I'd love to get your feedback on it, is asking them, how do you think that went?
Yeah.
What do you think you could have done better? And then if they're coming up with the reasons of how they could do it better, then it's them teaching themselves versus me just coming down on them, and now I've just made their bad day worse.
Yep. Love that. And I think this goes back to how we communicate and building trust from right out the gate, like with our clients and with our staff. So if you have that level of trust with them, and last week when they had a tough experience, you acknowledged and you praised for the good they did, and you gave them a chance to separate, the ability for them to respond to you is going to increase tenfold. And so, but also when we come up with the solutions on our own, it sticks, right? So I love that idea of asking questions, and I would make the same suggestion. I think it's also important to give context and be transparent and clear. Again, no reason for misunderstanding, putting the ball in their court kind of thing, where, hey, I noticed this, that, and the other. I just wanted to touch base with you. You're doing a great job, but this was of concern because of this, and this. What do you think we can do better as a team, or how can you do better in a situation like that next time? Once they understand that context, then it will spark those thoughts. And so I love that. And all this is tied together. None of this is independent of any of the other topics we've talked about, because it just kind of works its way into every interaction we have, how we're able to communicate and be aware of what's going on in ourselves and others, and then respond effectively. So yeah, I love that. Questions for me are powerful. Some of the work that I do is I coach individual leaders of, in the veterinary field and outside, and work through their challenges. But a coach doesn't do the work for you. I'm a basketball guy, so if there's a timeout and we huddle up and the coach is giving guidance and things like this and pointing out things that he sees with his perspective from the bench. Okay, break. Now we go play. The coach doesn't go onto the court. The coach is still on the bench. And so bringing understanding through them discovering and finding the solutions is the most powerful way to do that. When we just tell, it doesn't stick. And they may do it out of fear because, I was yelled at or told that I should do this or that or the other. And if not, I might, be disciplined. And so, overall, that is the best way to do it. And that happens through asking questions. They come up with the solution on their own with guidance, of course. And then it sticks. And then they're committed to going and doing what they came up with. And the ball's in their court, So yeah, love that.
Now speaking of teams, since you brought this up, a lot of times stress just doesn't come from the client. It actually comes within the team.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
What's your advice there with handling those team dynamics?
So that's a good one. There's a motto that I have is always be kind. Capital always be kind. Now let me clarify. Being kind, it doesn't mean that you just, bend over backwards and, let things happen. But you can be bold. You can clearly communicate and hold people accountable and be kind. There's a misconception there, so that's one for me. Always being kind as a leader. Kind to me is more related to being respectful rather than just, getting stepped on. So always be kind. Seek to understand the why of the situation. And always understand that there's two sides to a story. Often practice managers or practice owners deal with staff that, they have a confrontation on the team. There's a tough dynamic there and there's, strong emotions. And so it's a bad strategy for us as leaders of a clinic, right? If you're a manager or a doctor that's leading the clinic or an owner, to listen to a challenge and this team dynamic that's boiling up problems and just assuming and taking that as gospel. Like they perceive things a certain way, but perception is not always reality. And so, understanding across the team and understanding the why and then attacking there. I think too, sometimes we're afraid as leaders to make people uncomfortable. But I think sometimes that's necessary, not intentionally because you want to make them suffer and feel uncomfortable. No, but sometimes that has to happen because we have to confront the issue face on. And it may make some people feel uncomfortable, but if we're there with them during the challenge and coaching them through it, we can overcome that. We can go from one person to the next and, have these individual conversations, but, sometimes it's important to, bring a small group together, a focus group where there's, challenges and we create strategies with them to overcome the challenge, or if it's an entire team thing. And, again, that goes back to being transparent. If you've got ideas as a leader and then you just talk to one person, but sometimes, you have to use judgment with the situation. And that's why you got to understand the why. So, but that's a daily thing too. It's hard. I don't know that, again, there's not a checklist. You do these things, you'll never have challenges with your team, or the team dynamics always going to be just amazing. But I think those are things that, again, we talked about often, and they're no different here.
I like the idea though of that positive tension, right? It doesn't mean that we can't be uncomfortable, but respect is good.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you, at the beginning, you kind of who is Mike Glauser, and he likes to play basketball, and all these things. The list goes on. You said to grow in any of those things, there has to be discomfort. When you're weight training, that's what happens. Your muscles break down and tear, and then when you recover, they build up and become stronger. And so that same principle applies in our relationships. And sometimes with confrontations, yeah, they're uncomfortable. It hurts sometimes. The next day after you lift heavy weights or whatever, your body hurts. But yeah, that's going to happen. But you come out of it stronger with new knowledge and new strategies to move forward in the challenge. So
now, when dealing with those harsh team dynamics, when there's a lot of anger, I guess the two rules I always had when dealing with my team was use I statements versus you statements and keep it to the facts.
mm-hmm.
I talk about what was done, not your opinion of it. Are those pretty good rules?
Those are great rules, because this is part of emotional intelligence. You have to understand here and take responsibility. But what happens is that we a lot of times look to external reasons as to why things are happening. But my first rule of thumb is when I have a challenge, and this goes to the idea of use I statements, is to turn that around and ask how your involvement affected whatever happened, and look in the mirror kind of idea, right? Look in the mirror. And so that goes right along with using I statements. Talking about the facts, I couldn't be more in agreement, because if they're not facts, then it's just this is just fluff. Like this doesn't, we can't validate any of this. Has no foundation. And so we're wasting our time. We're going to talk about what really happened, and it's an opportunity for people to take responsibility and grow a little bit too, and be uncomfortable. So I think those are great rules. 100% agree. 100%. And because when we say you, then it just continues to build that wall up in that relationship, and the resentment can stay there, and it's, and then they're going to say, well, what about you? And it becomes like this kind of a childish back and forth. So yeah, using I statements is powerful. Totally agree.
Now, last couple of questions. Veterinary professionals, really easy for us to internalize stress and blame. So where does self-compassion play a role in EQ leadership?
Well, short answer is I think it plays a huge role. But remember the definition of, and it needs to be practiced every day. And I think it's something I say practice because it's something that you can get better at, just like anything. These, what we call soft skills that we're talking about, the ability to listen or communicate or have self-compassion or understand why we feel a certain way when we have confrontation. Those things we can get better at those things through practice. So I think it's super important. And remember, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage our emotions, to relieve stress, to empathize with others, to overcome these challenges. And these are definitely challenges, to feel maybe like blame or stress with something that went wrong with a pet or with a client. And so it goes right in line with what emotional intelligence is, the foundation of its definition. And so, the ability to look inward and understand yourself and why you feel those things can bring a lot of things to the surface that will help you kind of navigate those. And it's a needed and a powerful attribute, I think, in veterinary medicine for sure.
So Mike, this has been so insightful and helpful, but before we wrap up, is there one practical takeaway that you'd offer veterinary professionals who want to build that stronger leadership skill?
The first thing is, I'll call it the three A's. There needs to be acknowledgement or awareness first and foremost. If a veterinary professional says, well, I went to veterinary school to be a veterinarian, this stuff doesn't apply to me, first red flag. If you're a human being, it applies to you. So my recommendation would be the acknowledgement that this does apply to you. And then taking accountability for that acknowledgement and the work that you need to get better, and then taking action. So awareness, accountability, and action. As soon as you come out of school as a DVM, and this is what I say to young doctors that maybe are just coming out and looking for their first job. As soon as you have those letters next to your name, whether you like it or not, people will look to you to lead them. Even if you don't own a practice or have a title of, you're the medical director. And so there's a responsibility that comes with that title. And so you have to acknowledge that, okay, that's part of my job. I have to be a leader, even though I don't want to be, because people come to see you at the clinic. And so you have to know how to lead people. So that would be my suggestion, is just understanding that with your degree, you will be looked at as a leader. So let's become one.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, I know this is going out to people all over the world, and you do consulting right now primarily in Southern California. Do you do consulting beyond? Do you do virtual? Because I know a lot of people are going to want your services.
Yeah, 100%. So I do have, so right now I do a lot of consulting work with a group of veterinary hospitals in Southern California. But I do have other clients that are outside of the veterinary space, that are not even in the United States. And we do virtual sessions, and we get through their challenges and things the short answer is yes, absolutely. And in the veterinary space, there's a big need for this. Because of the kind of business that it is, there's a lot of need to understand these skills, to up our game, our emotional, intelligent game. And it's going to help you be a better leader, owner, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, we have all of your contact information into the links below, but what's the easiest way to get in touch with you?
So it'd be sending an email would be the easiest thing. My cell phone should be on there too. I'll always take a call. And if you're outside of the country, I do use WhatsApp. So those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being on the show and talking to us. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been fun. I appreciate it, Dr. Lee. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on Vet Watch, only at DVM 360, where what you know today protects everybody tomorrow.